The DA and ANC ministers are now in another fight about the SABC and the SABC bill. This is now the fourth major fight between the DA and the ANC. Fight number one was the Bella Act. The DA and other organizations such as AfriForum, Solidarity are opposed to the changes in the school admissions policy, in the school language policies, and particularly they're opposed to the transfer of power away from the school governing body on determination of those policies to the head of department, who will now have the final say on whether or not schools can accept or reject students based on language, and that obviously has implications on race in South Africa. So that's the first fight. The second fight is the NHI Act, National Health Insurance. There's a fight there because there's a perception that the National Health Insurance, which is a fund, will be an attempt by the government to take over the large funds which exist in the medical aid sector, because part of the bill talks specifically about how by 2029 there should be no medical aids in South Africa. So that's the second fight that the DA and the ANC are fighting, because the DA has vowed to protect medical aids, and there are concerns in middle class and elite South Africa that the ANC cannot run a healthcare system, and if they take over the healthcare system that is being run by the private sector, that will cause an exodus of doctors and cause worse problems than what is being experienced in the UK under the NHS, which is their national health system. Fight number three has been Russia and Ukraine. The ANC government is what is known as Russophile. They are, friendly with the Russian government. And even though they say that there's non-alignment in foreign policy, it's very clear that the ANC has a soft spot for Russia. And President Cyril Ramaphosa, when he went to Russia, did describe Russia as an ally to South Africa, which led to the DA Minister John Steenhuisen, the Minister of Agriculture, issuing a statement saying that, no, Ukraine is an ally to South Africa. And there's been a back and forth there, because what the ANC then said was, we told you that foreign policy is off the table in this coalition. You can't come here talk about foreign policy. The DA said, no, you guys are not in charge of us. We are partners in this arrangement, and you can't therefore just tell us what you want and then we're going to sit down as a passenger. We are co-pilots. And now we are on fight number four, the SABC and the SABC bill. Fight number four. How many months are we into this coalition arrangement? We are about 6 months in this coalition arrangement, 5 months in this coalition arrangement, thereabouts. And there's now a fourth fight that is on the table. What is this fight about? The purpose of the SABC bill is the following: to repeal the Broadcasting Act of 1999, to regulate the continued existence of the South African Broadcasting Corporation and to provide for its governance, and to amend the Independent Communications Authority of South Africa Act and the Electronic Communications Act of 2005. So that's the purpose. Just to bring everyone into context, because sometimes people watching are from America, they are from UK, they are from other parts of Africa. So just to bring everyone into the same contextual matrix, the South African Broadcasting Corporation is the public broadcaster in South Africa. The SABC currently has a unitary board structure which comprises 12 non-executive directors and 3 executive directors. The bill seeks to change this leadership structure by introducing a second board of directors. We'll talk about that later. The corporation is a state-owned company with the South African government as the sole shareholder and the minister as the shareholder's representative, who acts on behalf of the government to fulfill its obligations relating to use, protection, and access to broadcasting resources. The South African Broadcasting Corporation was established in 1936 and evolved from the African Broadcasting Corporation, which was initially focused on English radio broadcast, and it expanded to include Afrikaans in 1937 and then later introduced programming in various languages by 1942. During apartheid, the South African Broadcasting Corporation functioned primarily as a propaganda tool for the National Party, and it promoted apartheid ideology, suppressed dissenting voices, it broadcast content that favored the government, depicting opposition figures as terrorists and limiting coverage of violence in the townships. It also use the ethnically divided stations, radio stations like Bantu Radio, to reinforce policies of ethnic separation and censorship. The SABC's role during apartheid was pivotal in shaping public perception. It disseminated government-approved narratives while excluding critical viewpoints, that's contributing to the maintenance of the apartheid regime. It was very much like the propaganda instrument that Goebbels used during Nazi Germany for the indoctrination of the public. After apartheid, the SABC aimed for independence, but there was some political interference, and that increased over time, and this created credibility issues. Despite these challenges, however, it remains South Africa's largest broadcaster, and I think it's also Africa's largest broadcaster. On the radio front, the SABC has a total of 18 radio stations and manages the international radio station Channel Africa on behalf of the Department of Communications and Digital Technologies. Right? In terms of video entertainment, the SABC Video Entertainment Division currently offers 5 free-to-air channels, 2 of which are exclusively available on the digital terrestrial transmitter DTT platform. In addition, it offers 1 additional news channel, which is on channel 404 on DSTV via subscription satellite. And these 6 channels holistically deliver local and international content offerings in all of South Africa's languages throughout the country and really throughout Africa because of the DSTV and satellite TV publishing. The free-to-air channels, SABC 1, SABC 2, and SABC 3, attract on average 17.5 South African viewers a day, 17.5 million South African viewers a day. That's a significant number. That's not, chump change. The SABC is still the biggest game in town in terms of radio, in terms of TV, video, however you want to describe it. And even on the YouTube platform, the SABC News is the biggest African news platform on YouTube with over 2 million subscribers. So it's not a small operation. Even now, it's a significant operation. So what's the fight? What's the fight? On Sunday, the DA minister, Malatsi, said that he had written to the National Assembly Speaker, Togo Didiza, to inform her that he was withdrawing the bill. The bill was introduced to Parliament in October last year by Malatzi's predecessor, Mondli Gungubele, who is now his deputy due to the new cabinet of GNU, the coalition government between the ANC and the DA. So let's talk about what Malatsi had to say. He was the person who said, I'm not moving forward with this thing. Here's the statement that he published. Statement by Malatsi, Minister of Communications and Digital Technologies. Minister Malatsi withdraws the SABC bill to prioritize a funding model for the public broadcaster. I have informed the Speaker of the National Assembly, Togo Didiza, of my decision to withdraw the South African Broadcasting Corporation Limited Bill, commonly referred to as the SABC Bill. Following extensive stakeholder consultation and a thorough review of public submissions, it is clear that the SABC bill as it stands does not serve the long-term interests of the SABC or the South African public. More importantly, the current version does not adequately address the most important element regarding the SABC's sustainability, a credible funding model that will steer the public broadcaster to success. Despite the broadcaster's ongoing financial challenges and operational losses, the SABC bill suggests a delayed funding model, giving the minister 3 years to develop a sustainable framework. This approach does not meet the urgency required to stabilize the broadcaster and risks perpetuating an outdated licensing structure that will not provide the SABC with the necessary resources to fulfill its mandate. The bill would also grant the Minister of Communications additional powers, including influence over board appointments, which risks eroding the broadcaster's independence. At a time when media freedom is more crucial than ever, Given these concerns, I believe that trying to amend the bill is not the right path forward. Instead, the urgent development and implementation of a sustainable financial model for the SABC will be prioritized. The public broadcaster's financial stability is not only critical for its survival, but also essential for its ability to serve South Africans as an independent, trustworthy source of information, education, and entertainment. A sustainable funding model will empower the SABC to deliver on its mandate without undue political or financial pressures. It will enable the broadcaster to provide comprehensive, impartial news coverage, support South Africa's cultural industries, and reach audiences in every corner of our diverse nation. Rule 334 of the National Assembly rules permits the withdrawal of a bill before its second reading. As Minister of Communications and Digital Technology, I take this step not to abandon reform, but to lay the groundwork for a stronger, more resilient SABC. We will now focus our efforts on developing a funding model that provides the SABC with the financial stability and independence it needs to remain a pillar of our democracy and a trusted voice for all South Africans. The SABC found him somewhere noisy, and they asked him for a comment, and this is what he had to say.
Right now, we need a credible funding model for the SABC. The bill as it is does not answer, in my view, the question around, a sustainable funding model that will empower the SABC to be on the path of that financial sustainability and suitability that we need. And in addition to that, if you look at the written submissions that were provided to the bill, there's a lot of criticism in terms of the key components of the bill around the risks of editorial independence, around the risk of the appointments of the board, and those things I feel that are very important to refine the bill. But most importantly, we need to dedicate our energy towards that key funding model, and it is for those reasons that in exercising my duties as the minister, I've then withdrawn the bill.
The ANC is not having it. You remember the scene when T'Challa is about to be announced as the king of the people of Wakanda, and then you hear that sound, Mesa, ha, hu, Mesa, ha, hu, Mesa, ha, hu, and then the girl gets surprised. It's the Jabari. And then Baku goes there and says, we will not have it. We will not have it. Oh, this is exactly what the ANC is saying now. They are saying, we will not have it. We will not have it. Oh, we have watched from the mountains while your DA minister has withdrawn the bill. Anyway, let's get back into it. This is exactly what it feels like, by the way. There are three people who are taking up the fight with Solly Malatsi. They are all very close to the president and have at various times been entrusted with significant roles by the president. Their proximity to the president makes this particular confrontation and situation seem like Solly Malatsi is directly challenging the president and really frustrating the presidency. The three individuals are Mondli Gungubele, Khumbudzo Ntshavheni, and Khusela Diko. So the ANC minister in the presidency, Khumbudzo Ntshavheni, who was the former minister of communications and digital technologies from 2021 to 2023, has responded to what Mr. Malatsi said. And this is what she said. We will not have it all. No, this is what she said.
The SABC bill is not a bill of, is not a private member's bill. It's not Minister Malatsi's bill. It's a bill of cabinet and the executive. So in terms of the law, he cannot withdraw it without coming to cabinet to agree for his withdrawal. That bill was submitted to cabinet after it was approved by cabinet. It was submitted to parliament after it was approved to cabinet. The cabinet secretariat and the leader of government's business will deal with that matter in the next cabinet meeting, because there's no minister, even myself, I can't withdraw any bill which has been approved by cabinet unless I've tabled a bill. Remember, they are private members' bill. Unless there's Khumbudzo Ntshavheni, I've tabled a bill. Whatever the limitations the minister may find in the bill, he must come and convince cabinet to say there are these limitations in the bill, and for this reason, this is the amendments I want to make in the bill, and therefore I'm requesting cabinet to concur with me to withdraw that bill.
We will not have it all. Mondli Gungubele, the deputy minister and the former minister of communications, also gave a view showing that there's an issue and that he was not happy. He's still sounding positive and trying to be conciliatory towards the minister because now he's not in the cabinet, he's a deputy minister, right? But he was not happy. You know, we have watched as you gave your scientific technology to a girl who scoffs at tradition. That's what he sounded like. Mbaku version 2. Here's what he had to say to Clement Manyatela, who asked him direct questions about this very issue.
I really got shocked when I saw in Sunday Times that he has taken a decision to retract the bill. Why am I worried? SABC, in other words, is on tenterhooks, if that's the right English word. Mm-hmm. SABC cannot wait indefinitely to have access to money that actually profit better than it is now.
Yeah.
If you take out the bill, Clement, it's out of the parliamentary system. When you go back to parliament, you start the process afresh. You know what that process is? It's at the beginning where you do those long consultations. You know, the white paper beginning and all those kind of things. You consult with the people anew, right? And the process that it takes is very long. But when the bill is in parliament, all you need, you factor in the amendments that improves the funding model. And the process of the bill proceeding doesn't stop. And you stand a chance in that regard to actually complete the bill this year and deal with all the other nitty-gritties. But if you do take it out, you amend it in your home. When you go back, it's not like a box that you took it from your home and you're taking it back to your own cupboard or wardrobe. You are taking it back to parliament. It must follow like any other bill, those long processes.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. So I'm saying SABC, looking at the financial stress they are going through, owing Centec the amount of money they own, they've got no money now to invest in upskilling so that they can adapt with the modern, with the modern demands with regard to digital skills and so on.
And what about that concern as well that was raised by the minister about the bill opening the door to government interference? Because the minister seems to believe this bill gives too much power to even the communications minister over the appointment of board members. Doesn't that pose a danger to the independence of the broadcaster?
I think let's also correct that. There could be an unintentional misleading there. Let me tell you, the board of SABC is appointed by parliament, as you know. All what happens, the commercial board, which is a lower board at that level, is appointed by the existing board, which is appointed by parliament in consultation with the minister. The point is the ACT board, the main board, is appointed by parliament, not by the minister.
How do you then plan on reconciling your differences about this bill with the minister? Because at some point, you're going to have to put the differences aside and take one approach.
Well, myself and the minister are talking. Also in parliament, because I've also raised this thing in parliament. One of the options that are there, I'm not sure which is going to be used. Maybe myself and the minister can resolve. There may be no need to do that. It may go to the clearing house because it becomes a huge difference because of its consequences. So I am positive, Clement, that I think all of us, our intentions are noble. If all of us, our intentions are noble, a noble way must be found to resolve this matter. Myself and the minister will talk. We'll discuss this matter. He knows my views and so on the matter.
All right.
So you can see there's heat. There's not happiness. There's a lot of frustration. Now, Kusela Diko has given the most scathing response. She is the chairperson of the committee, and she is the former spokesperson for the president. She had to step down from the position of spokesperson for the president due to the Royal Baca PPE scandal, but she's made a political comeback, still within the realm of communications, government communications. So after that whole scandal with her currently deceased husband, she stepped down from the presidential spokesperson job. She faced a disciplinary process in the presidency and was given a written warning for failing to disclose business interests as is required of civil servants. You know, must be nice to, have your husband implicated in corruption of 150 million. You are also there financially involved, but then you're just given a warning. So she returned actually to government, working as the Deputy Director General at the Government Communication and Information Systems, the GCIS. And she was one of 3 deputy directors at the GCIS responsible for content, right? Which looks at SABC, looks at these types of functions. That GCIS role that she had as deputy director is a powerhouse position as it oversees all government communications and campaigns. Now, just an interesting side note, just so that you can see these correlations. The GCIS reports to the minister in the presidency, Khumbudzo Ntshavheni. So if you look at the relationships between Khusela Diko, Khumbudzo Ntshavheni, as well as Mondli Gungubele, you can see that these are trusted lieutenants within President Cyril Ramaphosa's presidency, some of his most trusted people that is kept around him. In fact, at some point, Mondli Gungubele was Minister of State Intelligence because the president needed him to go see what's happening there, particularly after Arthur Fraser did that whole bombshell of Phala. And I've got Phala content coming. Put this in your calendar, 26th of November. The Phala case is going to the Constitutional Court, but I'm going to make an episode just about that. But you can see, these are trusted people of the president. Here's what she said, Khusela Diko, right? Here's her statement. And you can feel the acid in the statement. Here's the statement. The chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Communications and Digital Technologies, Ms. Khusela Sangoni Diko, has noted with grave concern the decision of the Minister of Communication and Digital Technologies, Mr. Solly Malatsi, to withdraw the South African Broadcasting Bill from Parliament, as reported in the Sunday Times. The Portfolio Committee has not yet been formally notified of the withdrawal of the proposed legislation in line with the rules of the National Assembly. Nonetheless, the report states that the minister has decided to withdraw the bill, believing it is totally flawed. This does not address the funding model of the public broadcaster and assigns too much power to the minister in appointing board members. While appreciative of the fact that as the executive authority, the minister may rescind the bill for whatever reason before its second reading in the House, the chairperson holds that this decision by the minister would be highly ill-advised. And it is no exaggeration to say it would sound the death knell for the South African Broadcasting Corporation. The challenges facing the SABC require a considered and urgent response, not trigger happy action, which serves no purpose but to frustrate and disrupt processes already underway. To withdraw the bill at this stage means to delay the implementation of crucial reforms necessary to save yet another crucial and strategic public institution. Initiated by the government in 2018 and only introduced to the parliament in October 2023, the SABC seeks, among others, to provide for the continued existence of the SABC, provide for its governance, and consequently amend the Independent Communications Authority of South Africa Act and the Electronic Communications Act. To date, the bill has undergone a thorough public participation process, with the 6th Parliament having received about 20 written submissions from the SABC itself, academia, youth representatives, organized labor, and other interested parties. Before I forget, because I'm going to forget, that's not enough submissions. 26 that's close to zero. This is a very important institution. If you say you got 20 written submissions, that's nothing. 60 million people. Anyway, and there's an issue with public participation. Public participation for a lot of these bills has been cooked and baked. I don't want to forget that. I've been to some of the public participation processes. People are reading from scripts. They are passed in. The ANC has been playing the game to pass legislation in their favor in the public participation process. I saw that with the Electoral Amendment Act, and it was chaotic to say the least. But let's continue. Even with the Bella Act, by the way, they public. Anyway, let me continue. Let me continue. Let me go back to. But now I'm done with me now. Back to the statement. The Seventh Parliament, understanding the urgent challenges facing the public broadcaster, prioritized this crucial legislation and held oral hearings into the submissions in September 2024. The committee diligently studied and interrogated these submissions, and all concerns raised by stakeholders were attended to. The Department of Communications and Digital Technologies, the DCDT, which the minister leads, was expected to have responded to the issues raised during public participation processes by the 17th of October 2024. This process underway and agreed to by the committee and the minister's presence would have provided the committee with a clear way forward to amend the bill as provided for in the rules of parliament and subvert any unnecessary delays in the processing of this sorely needed legislation. The chairperson remains convinced that the issues raised by civil society, including the Democratic Alliance, relating to lack of clarity on the funding model of the public mandate of the SABC, time limits on the president and on the appointment of the SABC board, the creation of a subsidiary commercial company and board, and the potential lack of independence in the appointment of the subsidiary commercial company were not insurmountable and could have been remedied through an amendment by the committee. Rule 286 of the National Assembly Rules explicitly confers on authority on parliamentary committees to amend or, where necessary, redraft bills before them. Thus, the chairperson strongly believes that an attempt to withdraw this bill from Parliament will delay and derail the transformative and developmental interventions the government has been pursuing in state institutions. Ms. Diko said that the committee has been at pains to put in place a fast-track process to finalize the SABC bill, the absence of which has created a serious legislative vacuum that has dire consequences. To this end, the government and even the committee itself had initiated various engagements with stakeholders on the possible funding model for the public mandate of the SABC, the most substantive and urgent of the concerns raised against the bill. Another of the major concerns coming from the public participation process was the need for speedy finalization of the audio and audiovisual white paper, and Ms. Diko would like to urge the minister to prioritize the finalization of the white paper before canning a process underway, as this has a bearing on the amendment of the bill. She further said that the public broadcaster could not be allowed to fail because its demise would spell unmitigated disaster also for Centec, the country's signal distributor, with a ripple effect to over 130 community radio stations, several private broadcasters, including commercial radio and TV stations and ICT service providers. Ultimately, the most affected stakeholders will be communities across the country which rely on public broadcasters to provide them with news and public information that impacts their lives and is delivered in all official languages, including sign languages. It is undisputed that the SABC is the only broadcaster with the capacity, reach, and ability to deliver on this important mandate. Ms. Diko commends the SABC leadership and staff for immense strides recorded over the last 2 years, saying that they are a testament to the dedication and patriotism of hardworking men and women at the public broadcaster, who, despite enormous pressure and financial constraints, were resolute that the show would go on. In the 2023-2024 financial year, the SABC has turned the corner on its financial management, achieving an unqualified audit opinion once again after 9 years. Should the reports of the minister's decision to withdraw the bill be true, and due to the gravity of the situation at the broadcaster, we urge the department to accelerate the process of reworking the bill and reintroduce a new version to Parliament within the current financial year. In the meantime, the committee will invite the minister to indicate how, in the interim, the financial situation at the broadcaster shall be improved to ensure sustainability until this much needed legislation is amended and the issues attended to it are resolved. Failure to reintroduce the bill timeously will leave individual members of the committee or the committee itself with no option but to entertain introducing a committee or private member's bill in the interest of the SABC for consideration by Parliament. Issued by the Parliamentary Committee Communication Service, what am I saying? Issued by the Parliamentary Communication Services on behalf of the chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Communications and Digital Technologies, Ms. Kusela Sangoni Diko. Hey, wena. Hey, I had to read the whole thing. You sometimes you just got to go through the whole thing and provide full context because we have time on YouTube. We don't have to go to the next programming. We have some time here. Whew. So there's a bit of a contradiction. I'm going into my comments and reflections now. There's a bit of a contradiction in Kusela's Diko positions because she's saying the SABC has turned the financial corner. They've got a unqualified, financial opinion for the first time, audit opinion for the first time. But there's a financial crisis at the SABC. Can't have it both ways. But that's a side comment. Let's go to the main comments. Main comments now. The Democratic Alliance seems to have learned a lesson from the NHI and the Bella Acts. The lesson being, if they allow the law to pass, they will have less negotiating leverage. So to maximize negotiating leverage, you have to slow or remove legislation. The minister is legally entitled to do this. He has the power and the authority to do this. That is not in question. The DA also has been keen to re-establish their role in government as being that of a co-pilot, not a first-class passenger. The ANC government has really been treating them like a passenger. And this has really caused frustration in the Democratic Alliance. And they've been trying to find ways to re-establish their authority, their co-governing authority in this coalition. Right now, the DA has some leverage and they want to use it. Some things have shifted that give them a little bit more leverage than before, maybe 3 weeks ago, a month ago. The US elections have given them a very powerful ally. The Republicans are anti the war in Ukraine, and they are not keen on, some of the things that have been happening. The DA has been visiting America. The Republicans, while they are anti the war in Ukraine, anti-Zelensky, are very concerned about the support that the ANC government has been giving to Russia and has been giving to Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran. So right now, the DA, because they've got these relationships with the Republicans in particular, are going to be able to whisper in the ears of the Republicans in ways that the ANC would definitely be concerned about. So now the DA has found a manager that they can speak to. There's nothing that Helen Zille likes more than speaking to the manager. She is a Karen at a very high level of Karen-ness. Now she's got a manager that she can speak to, the Republicans in America, and she will speak to them. Make no mistake about it. She will speak to them. They've already been having these relationships. And you must be aware the AGOA deal is under review. And Donald Trump is somebody who doesn't like disloyalty. He's somebody who likes people to be, he's a with us or against us type of guy. And because of all of these dynamics, and because he's got hardliners in his cabinet that he's already announcing, and within the Republican Party, hardliners, they don't want people who are undermining them on the global stage. What this means is that the DA now has leverage to get the ANC to talk to them, to listen to them, and to play nice with them. The dynamics have shifted. Number two, they have been able, the DA, to show muscle by marching at the Vutraga Monument with the leaders of the Afrikaner community, Solidarity, AfriForum. This has shown to the ANC, to President Ramaphosa, that they have a network of donors willing to fight the next group of ANC leaders in the local government elections and in 2029, and that they will be funded. AfriForum has access to large pools of money. The network, that Afrikaner network of CEOs, of billionaires, is the wealthiest network in South Africa to date. We've seen that one individual, for instance, the CEO of Capitec, the founder of Capitec, Michel Leroux, has donated in the last 3 years over 100 million rands to the Democratic Alliance. Then you add the Oppenheimers, who've donated significant amounts of money to the DA as well. You begin to see that the posturing of the DA now is now one where they are saying, we're ready to fight you guys. And really, if you guys keep playing this game, we will fight you. Another thing that is in their pocket, Adrian Gore, the CEO of Discovery, is vehemently opposed to the NHI. And he's one of the most influential leaders in the business world in South Africa. The same is true of Rupert, who has shares in Mediclinic opposed to the NHI. The DA have financial muscle going into the local government elections, and they have allies who are very angry about the NHI and the Bella Bill. And I must be fair to the DA. I must be fair to them. The ANC cannot just try to force them to continue with the pre-2024 elections political agenda and to simply ask the DA to accept ANC decisions on policy, whether it's domestic or foreign policy. The ANC won a plurality of votes, but it did not win the election outright, right? They won a plurality of votes, which gave them more of a mandate to govern than anybody else. I'm of the view that winning 40%, 45% gives you a mandate more than any other party. And I'm of the view that it was correct for the ANC to become the next leader of the coalition going into this current administration. I'm also of the view that in KwaZulu-Natal, it should have been MK Party, not necessarily ANC. I think that what was done in KwaZulu-Natal was unethical, and it denied the will of the voters who gave the plurality mandate to the MK Party, not to the ANC and or the DA. That's a story for another day. So the ANC won a plurality of the votes, but it did not win the election. It didn't win outright. That means when you have coalition partners, those partners have a say. They ought to have a say. They ought to be consulted. You need to come to the public with, what is it called? There's this Latin phrase that is, you need to be what? What is what? I can't remember it now. It's a very fancy phrase. What is it? My fancy Latin has left me. Come back when a Latin, where are you? Okay, we'll see. We'll see what happens if I remember. If you remember, please post it in the comments. So there has to be a meeting of the minds. There has to be an agreement. Right now, the ANC is not exclusively in charge, and they've been trying to bully the DA just to go along with everything. And I think that's unfair, and it's not the mandate that they have from the public. I think 2024 was the beginning of the end. It's not the same level of rejection of the party as what we saw in Botswana with the BDP, but it was a rejection nonetheless. So far, the ANC has been trying to retain power as if nothing has changed, but things have changed, and the DA is right to be frustrated, even though a lot of this was inevitable. It was inevitable that these kind of clashes would happen. And many people did point out, why are you guys trying to rush into this deal with the ANC? You don't see eye to eye. You are not on the same page. Why not necessarily let them fail to form a coalition with all of these other opposition parties if you really want a transition? But they said, no, the markets want us to go with ANC. The markets love Ramaphosa. We're going with them. So anyway, some of this stuff was inevitable. It is what it is. The deal has been made. And in that, the DA is right to be frustrated, but some of this is on you. You knew what these guys would try to do to you, and they're doing it, right? So going now to the SABC conversation, the SABC has played a vital role in entertaining South Africa and informing South Africa. The shows Yizo Yizo, Scoot is Nice, Suburban Bliss. Suburban Bliss was one of my favorites, I don't want to lie, growing up as a kid. Intersections, Soul City, Ubambo Lwami. These are just some of the shows that have been brilliantly made under the SABC banner, highly influential. Yizo Yizo. Who can forget? People were calling themselves Papa Action in classrooms. People were calling them, it was hectic. It was hectic. We had a guy in our school who was named Javas the Gorilla. And if you remember, that was part, I think, of season 1. Season 1 of Yizo Yizo, season 2 of Yizo Yizo, the return, the music, the linguistic stuff, all of those things. Yizo Yizo was so influential in classrooms that parents actually started saying that we're not allowed to watch Yizo Yizo. That's how dangerous Yizo Yizo was. It was supposed to be a story showing you Why? And I took part of that. Me, I was watching Izo. I was like, no, I need to study. I need to get out of school. I need to do well in life. But other people were looking at Papa Action. They were looking at all of these guys. They're like, yo, no, this is the life. I want to be Papa Action. I want to be this guy. I want to be. So even though it was supposed to be, it almost had the same impact that Joker had. Because Joker was supposed to be Joker 1, not the second one, which is rubbish. Joker 1 was supposed to show the problems of these type of Lone Ranger social misfit characters. But a lot of white America watched it and they became Donald Trump supporters. Which was not the intention of the film. But sometimes that's what happens. If you over portray a bad guy, you can end up people wanting to be that bad guy, not necessarily the good guy. This is what happened with some of the characters in Yizo. People took the wrong message. But what I'm trying to put across, without talking too much about Yizo, is that these shows, SABC shows, were the best shows in South Africa, in Africa. They were. I'm not much of a soapy fan, but I also know that there's a loyal following with the SABC soapies, Generations, Movango, Isidingo. All of these also were very influential. Very influential, right? I mean, the quality that SABC has had historically is something that must be reattained and can be reattained. Having said that, I want to go to my second point around SABC in particular. The SABC, and this is where I disagree with Solly Malatsi and the DA, and those who are talking from, some of the people who support the DA are competitors to the SABC. For instance, DA gets funding in part from NASPAS. NASPAS, as you know, used to own DSTV MultiChoice, and MultiChoice has been losing. A weaker DA can make a stronger MultiChoice because they still own Showmax, etc., etc. So some of the discussions that are being had about the SABC are coming from, a position that I don't think is good or healthy even for the SABC, and we should not necessarily entertain those arguments as being legitimate. Here's the point I want to make. The SABC should not have a profit funding model as a state broadcaster. Its role is much more important than that. And if you force it to have this funding model, which is like, you must make a profit, you must only create and innovate from the profits, you will not be able to have a quality SABC. The dynamics have shifted. The consumption media dynamics have shifted. We're living in an age now where you've got Netflix, Disney Plus, you've got all of these other avenues that are available for entertainment, YouTube, TikTok, etc. Here's the reality about production in this age, in this era. Netflix poured billions of dollars, US dollars, a year into that business before they even reached profitability. I've read the book by Reed Hastings. I've read it, and it took them a lot of time to get to a point where they became a dominant media platform. There are other realities that Disney as a company has spent billions of US dollars on content over the last 60 years. And to be able to compete with these brands, you need billions of content poured in without there being a focus on profit. For many years, Netflix was making losses, and everybody understood that we are playing for global dominance. We will recoup this money later. We can't be saying Netflix must be profitable in 2005, 2010, 2015, and it wasn't. They were still spending billions on content, billions and billions and billions on content. Read the book by Reed Hastings. You'll see they're making a loss. Even Amazon, for a long time, just to give you another example, was spending more money, billions more than it was earning, and was making a loss till they got a certain level of global dominance. Sometimes this is the nature of business. And if you have deeply committed investors who understand the vision in the private sector, you can do that. What Netflix did, what Amazon did, running for years at a loss because you're trying to gain market share. Obviously, the SABC is not funded by billionaires, funded by the public. But the point that I'm making is that this idea that the state broadcaster must always make a profit is wrong. The state broadcaster must be funded for its needs, not necessarily to make a profit. Because if you do that, you create certain conflicts I'm going to discuss later. Right? I've spoken right now about the competition for viewers is a global one. It has changed. It has been disrupted by smartphones, streaming, social media. It's no longer the same game as it was in 1995, 1996. And to produce quality content requires serious funding. And the funding needs are significantly more than what is being given to the SABC right now. The SABC, to be quite honest with you, probably needs 4 times more money than it has, about 20 billion, to compete a year with streaming, with podcasts, to make future-proof content based on current trends. Because people are consuming content now more in video on demand, streaming, than they are just live TV. And the SABC needs to be able to adapt to that. There have not been as many modern shows of the same quality and impact as Yizo Yizo, as Good is Nice, all of these other shows that I was mentioning earlier. But that content is possible. More quality local content is now showing up on Showmax and on Netflix. But that doesn't have to be the case. This is not a fight the SABC has to lose. They have historically won this fight. They've won it and they can win it again. And it's important that the SABC is able to be a content leader in the same way that the BBC is still producing some of the best shows coming out of Britain. It's still training some of the best actors coming out of Britain. That still remains true because even though there are challenges with funding, the BBC has retained quality. Currently, the SABC is funded through government grants, TV and radio licenses, advertising, and sponsorship. The total revenue in the previous year was 5 billion. The expenditure was 5.2 billion. So the expenses, were 5.2 billion. So you can see that SABC is still making a loss. But it shouldn't be the case that we are looking at the SABC like that. The revenue from advertising, TV advertising, was 1.6 billion. The revenue from radio advertising was 1.1 billion. So 2.7 billion coming from advertising revenue when the expenses were 5.2 billion. You can see that there's a big gap in the needs of the SABC, but I'm submitting to you that the SABC should not be funded on this model. If you say SABC needs 20 billion a year, so be it. Put a portion of that maybe in VAT or whatever the case may be, because the SABC occupies an important role. The reason why I'm saying that the SABC should not have to rely on the advertising model of business is because that is exactly how advertisers end up controlling the voice of the news media. As far as possible, the broadcasters should have journalists who are free to be as vocal about alcohol companies, insurance companies, betting companies as they are about opposition politicians. The manufacturing of consent. There's a book. Where's that book? I have it somewhere here. I know I've spoken about it before. The Manufacturing of Consent. It's a book that was written by Noam Chomsky and Edward S. Herman. This book speaks about how the media is curtailed as a voice by the powers of corporations and billionaires. So in this instance, the manufacturing of consent, it relies on the relationships and the webs which are tangled between big companies and news companies. Think about who the biggest advertisers are on TV. It's insurance companies, it's alcohol companies, it's betting companies. These are the companies, and the insurance companies, it's funeral policies or car insurance policies, right? That's a large part of the advertising, and then it's fast food companies, right? KFC, Nando's, that kind of thing. In the South African context, there is a concentration of corporate might in a few hands. The companies advertising alcohol are also are owned by the people advertising insurance, advertising banking, advertising supermarkets. Because of the Stellenbosch mafia, because of the history of South Africa and how Stellenbosch became the commercial capital in terms of ownership for South Africa. And there's a book, Stellenbosch Mafia. You should read that book to understand how much a lot of the wealth is still concentrated in the hands of a billionaire class which found its voice and power during apartheid, right? So because of that, you can have media not being vocal, honest, and speaking in the interest of South Africa and beginning to speak in the interest of the billionaires. In South Africa, companies like Naspers, Remgro, Shoprite control large parts of the economy, and they are advertisers. They are advertisers, these owners. So billionaires, if you think about billionaires, even billionaires like Patrice Motsepe, who owns lots of businesses, but also has relationships with presidents who appoint ministers like Mondli Kungubele, like Khumbudzo Ntshavheni. That's a brother-in-law to the president, a person who's doing business which will then have to advertise. If he's unhappy with the coverage, do you not see how that can create conflicts of interest if the SABC relies on advertising revenue? Relying on advertising revenue is the best way for media to become dishonest. It's the best way for a public broadcaster to become captured, to become a tool for the people in power who are custodians of power, and not a tool for the education and enlightenment of the public. Public broadcasting is a public good and should not be left to market forces, to billionaire forces. And you know what? The apartheid regime understood this. They understood that this is a powerful tool for propaganda. We're not going to worry about funding. We're going to give this entity as much money as it needs so that we can indoctrinate the people, keep the people under control. In an independent and democratic country, while you don't want a propaganda arm, you want a robust media arm. You want a robust news arm. You cannot have that while advertising becomes an issue. So I disagree with Soli Malatsi and the DA on this idea that, SABC just needs to find a way to make the money and sustain itself. And the implication, therefore, is that, we're going to cut costs, we're going to fire people, blah, blah, blah. SABC, I've been to the SABC multiple times to provide analysis. The institution is still a solid institution, but it needs money. It needs a lot of money to be able to compete in the modern environment. You can see the equipment is getting outdated. You can see that there are issues sometimes with board, set design, etc., etc. They cover up a lot of stuff because they are professionals, they are committed, they know what they've been doing, and they've been doing it for a long time. But I would say the SABC needs 20 billion a year to really become competitive, and it's necessary for that money to be put in and found. Much more is lost in corruption from municipal government, by the way. Much more is lost in tender fraud and all of that stuff. It sounds like a lot of money, but for something as important as the SABC, it's not even nearly enough. If it was up to me, if I was like running the country or whatever, I would put even 50 billion a year for SABC. That's how important I view that entity to be. It has to be a functional entity that can get the best journalists, the best actors. You want everything to be coming through SABC so that you can actually provide the public with the greatest quality of content on the platforms where they don't have to pay DSTV 1,000 rands a month for nonsense. That's what I think, right? So when it comes to that, the other issue, I agree with the DA. There are issues with having two boards and also issues with giving the board control of editorial processes, right? So right now, the Broadcasting Act does not give editorial powers to the board, but this new one does, and that's a problem, right? As per the definitions in the proposed bill, editorial responsibility means having the ability to control the content and the selection of programs and their arrangement, either in a chronological broadcasting schedule in the case of radio and television broadcasting services, or in a catalog in the case of on-demand media services. Section 7.6 of the bill says the board must prepare and submit to the authority at least every 3 years SABC policies that will ensure compliance with the authority's code of conduct as prescribed, the corporation's licensing conditions, and the objectives contained in this act, including news and current affairs editorial policy. That's a problem. Programming policy. Local content. Education policy. A universal access policy, language policy, and a religious policy. Editorial policy must not be given to the board, which is appointed by Parliament, or no. Editorial decisions must be left to professional journalists in the newsroom. They must be left to content creators. You cannot have politicians doing this, because what you then have is a remix of what the Nationalist Party has. There's been an appetite by some ministers to take control of how the SABC covers the government, how the SABC covers social issues, how the SABC covers commercial issues. That is dangerous. That is not pro-democratic. That is an attempt to replicate some of what the apartheid government did. The SABC doesn't have to support your party. The SABC doesn't have to support your president. The SABC doesn't have to support or manage issues around Pala or any scandal that affects anybody. They have to be honest and serve the people. So giving this board these kind of powers, nope, that's dangerous. That's very dangerous. And this is in the bill. This is in the bill. This is something that's quite problematic. I disagree with the DA on funding. I disagree with the ANC on this issue of editorial policy. You don't want that. Then there's the second board issue. The second board, the commercial board, will not be directly accountable to Parliament, and that is an issue. According to Section 26 of this proposed bill, the commercial board must be appointed must be appointed by the corporation in consultation with the minister after following an independent, transparent, and competitive process contemplated in this section. Guys, no. Why do I say this? We have seen how boards get problematically appointed when they are appointed by a minister. By himself, one man, one skipper. No. I think that there's a problem there. You're creating a duplication. You're creating problems. This in and of itself, on principle, right? Aside from what we've seen historically, in principle, in terms of appointments of board, in principle, this creates two centers of power in the SABC. And one center of power reports to Parliament and the other reports to the minister. Ministers who sometimes don't answer questions in Parliament, who get asked questions and then say, I've answered, even though they haven't answered. Then people have to go to court to get answers. That's dangerous. That's dangerous. For me, from my perspective, it's important that editorial decisions of the SABC remain the purview of the staff so that another group of politicians do not capture the SABC to serve their own needs. It's important that there be one set of leaders within the SABC, one board, one executive. You can't have commercial board, blah, 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 blah. A house divided against itself will not stand. That's what the wise man said. He said a house divided against itself will not stand. And I don't think he was lying. In fact, if I were to say something, the amendments that are necessary to the Broadcasting Act are protections of journalists and presenters from political targeting and commercial targeting. They are commitments to expanding some of the staffing entities that are needed, because right now the news staff in the SABC is being depleted. The news world in South Africa has very few veteran journalists because they don't have job security within the SABC and they do not get support with tools of trade. Many of the journalists who start off in SABC end up working as spokespersons for government departments. They end up working as spokespersons for companies, and they end up working in public relations. They end up working as communications consultants because they are not earning enough. They want to earn better and take care of their family. So they leave. What that does is it creates this juniorization of the newsroom. It creates journalists who don't have the authority and gravitas to challenge ministers, presidents, etc. And that undermines the credibility of the news. Look in America, you'll see lots of senior journalists. Lots of journalists who've been there for a long period of time who are able to speak truth to power when necessary. But if you have a bunch of 25-year-olds all the time, you're not going to have ministers being able to be challenged because you need people with cachet. You need people with gravitas. You lose that when the financial incentives are more favorable for journalists working in the private sector than for the public broadcaster. Private sector, which serves Rupert, which serves Kuzbeka, which serves the alcohol companies, which serves betting companies, all of this stuff. That's dangerous. That's dangerous for a public to not have a public broadcaster which can stand as their custodian, their shield against corporate abuse, against government abuse. That's an issue. That's an issue. That's an issue. The incentive structure, which makes it more lucrative to work for the government as a spokesperson and to work for companies as a communications consultant in public relations, is not healthy for robust journalism. It means that journalists are likely to hold back from criticism of the companies while they work for the public broadcaster, criticism of government departments and ministers, because guess what? These are going to be their future employers. You can't have that. You can't have that. It's problematic. And this bill, I don't think this bill is not make sure, guys. It's not make sure, as it is. And this whole idea that, no, we'll just amend here and there. If you remove the problematic bits of the bill, it's the same as the Broadcasting Act. Then there's no need for an amendment. Just allocate money to the SABC appropriately. That's what's necessary. So I think that as things stand, Soli Malatsi is wrong on financing, and Kusela Tiko, Mondli Kungubele, and whoever else wants to control SABC editorial agenda is wrong. Whoever else wants to do that, you're wrong, whoever you are, right? So, guys, 4 fights: NHI, Bella Bill, Russia, Ukraine, and now SABC. The coalition government in Germany has collapsed. It's collapsed. They're going to elections next year. Is this coalition going to make it? Itlofila kule. Itlofila. Nakiboni. What do you think? Will this coalition government continue to hold, considering the fights that are accumulating and also the comments that are being made by Helen Ziller in the streets? What do you think? Let's have a conversation in the comments. I'm there in the comments all the time with you. Till the next one.